In the last three videos, we showed that a quadrilateral was a parallelogram, once using the distance formula, once using the slope formula, once using the midpoint formula. I want to tack on two bonus questions here just to show how we can work with more complicated quadrilaterals as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the same 4 points, and I'm just going to ask these two bonus questions. Is this figure a rhombus, and is it a rectangle? All right, and so I don't want to just say yes or no. I want to actually justify my response with some calculations. All right, so let's think about this one first. All right, is ABCD a rhombus? All right, so there are a couple different things we can do. So remember, to show something as a rhombus, I can show that it has 4 congruent sides. I can show that it's a parallelogram, which we've already done, and say that it only needs to have 2 congruent sides that are consecutive. Or I can show that its diagonals are perpendicular. Which one of those techniques do you think would be the easiest one for us to do? Well, you know what we've done is we've already done all of the distance formula. So I'm going to be able to answer the question of whether this is a rhombus using this work from showing it was a parallelogram. Based on these calculations, what do you think my answer is? And what is my justification for it? Well, the length of AB is the square root of 26. That's this side. And the length of this side is the square root of 20. So these are 2 consecutive sides of the parallelogram, and they're not congruent. And so that is enough for us to say, no, it's not a rhombus, because AB is not congruent. So I'm going to write the congruent symbol, and then I'm going to write a slash through it. All right, so that's all I need to say along with these calculations to answer the question of whether this is a rhombus, because a rhombus has congruent consecutive sides, and this doesn't, so this isn't a rhombus. What about the question of whether it's a rectangle? Well, it definitely doesn't look like a rectangle, so I'm going to guess no right off the bat there. But how are we going to justify that using math instead of just kind of our intuition? Once again, we can use the fact that a rectangle is a parallelogram with a right angle, or that this has 4 right angles. So how do we know if these were right angles, the sides would be perpendicular? Or how can we show whether or not these sides are perpendicular to each other? Well, remember, we're going to use the slope. All right, so the slope of AB is, we showed that that was 1 over 5, and the slope of AD is 2. Can these be the slopes of perpendicular sides? Well, no, because perpendicular sides, remember, their slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. So a line that's perpendicular to this line would have a slope of negative 5 over 1. And this isn't negative 5 over 1. Same thing's going on with this. If I think about this as 2 over 1, any line that's perpendicular to this would have a slope of negative 1/2. And those aren't the relationships between the slopes of these two sides. These are not negative reciprocals. So ABCD is not a rectangle. All right, and so that's enough information to answer the questions based on what we've done already. So you can see that this was a case where some of the work that we did in the first part would help us out with the second part. So we can answer the figuring out if it's a rectangle really easily if we solve the first part using the slope formula. We could have proven very easily whether or not it's a rhombus if we had used the distance formula the first time around. And if we had used the midpoint formula the first time around, that wouldn't have helped us with either of those extra questions. So that gives you a sense that even though the midpoint formula might be a little bit easier to apply to show that it's a parallelogram, if you need to do extra work over that, you might find that you've got to duplicate some of the work you did before anyway. So at any rate, this is enough of an example, I think, for you to tackle the homework problems that I've given you. Keep a close eye on your formula reference sheets and on your quadrilateral sheets. So you're going to need to have this turned in to me. You're going to need to submit your copy to this. You're not just doing that because it's homework. You're also filling this form out because it's going to help you a lot to collect all of the information you need in order to solve these problems.